Denver 8 TV, your city, your source.
Welcome to Denver 8's complete coverage of a Denver City Council committee meeting. It's in these committee meetings that council members study proposed legislation, formulate policy, and work with community leaders and other city officials on important public issues.
Today, Denver 8 brings you the Infrastructure and Culture Committee. This dual-focused committee reviews work of the city's largest departments, including Public Works, Parks and Recreation, and Arts and Venues. In doing so, it also examines related facilities such as our museums, gardens, libraries, and zoo. This work brings it in close association with the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District programs. The Infrastructure and Culture Committee of Denver City Council is chaired by District 1 Councilperson Susan Shepard. Please stand by. The session is about to begin.
Folks could sit down and get settled in. That would be really great. We have a very substantive agenda today. Good morning. Today's Wednesday, June 3rd. This is the Infrastructure and Culture Committee. I am Susan Shepard from District 1, Northwest Denver, the chair of this committee, and we'll start with introductions on my left.
I'm Deborah Ortega, City Council at Large, not a voting member of the committee, but very interested and been very involved in this topic.
Jeannie Robb, Council District 10.
Robin Kinich at large.
Peggy Lehmann, District 4.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Judy Montero, District 9.
Wolfing. Sort of. Half.
No, you're not.
You still are, honey.
Albus Brooks, Councilman-elect for District 9.
There you go. Exactly.
Great District 8, not a voting member.
Shelley Smith, committee staff. Okay. So we have a very substantive item for our first discussion. It's Bill Request 381 concerning an intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Department of Transportation and regarding I-70. And our team is already at the table to present. So Diane, why don't you take it away and introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Council members. Sorry, boy, I'm starting out well, aren't I? Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't realize that was going to happen. Thank you very much. I'm Diane Barrett. I'm the Mayor's Chief Projects Officer and have been working on I-70 together with our enormous team of staff and particularly our city engineer, Leslie Thomas, and the Deputy CFO, Gretchen Holra. And we will be here today to talk to you, but we also want you to know that we have in the audience many of our partners inside and outside the city. With respect to inside the city, Mike Anderson is here. He is our flood guy, I call him, but he's the wastewater guru for us. And we have from CDOT, Tony DeVito. Tony is the project manager for the I-70 project. I want to raise your hand, Tony, so they know who you are. And Rebecca White, who is in communications and governmental relations for CDOT and has been working on this project for as long as I can remember and probably as long as Leslie can remember. We have Brian Pinkerton also here, who is working on the drainage project with Leslie to answer specific questions. And if they should come up. I don't think I've missed anyone. Oh, I'm so sorry. Paul Hindman, the Director of Urban Drainage and Flood Control District. How could I forget Paul is here.
It's an easy name to forget, Paul, don't worry. Pity party up to you.
The number of people who are here to talk or to help us today. You're funny. The number of people who are here to help us today indicate to you the importance of this project to the city. Our partnership with CDOT is is important in many ways, particularly in the sense of the neighborhoods through which this highway runs and what happens to them. And I know that each and every one of you is concerned with that neighborhood, with those neighborhoods, and join in the mayor, with the mayor in that concern. And consequently, we've been working on this project for a very long time. Leslie could tell you stories from 11 years ago. Many of us have worked for years, and most of us have been working for the last several months to come to a conclusion with a partnership that can go with CDOT to their P3 procurement. The Transportation Commission recently authorized a true P3 procurement: design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. So they will be bidding that. They've already sent out RFQ in March, and they will be bidding that this summer. So it's time for the city and CDOT to formalize the agreements that we've been working toward for a very long time. The IGA that we're bringing to you today is a document that works on two projects. They are separate projects, but they are related in this document. The city is
Diane,
going...
can I interrupt you for a second? I just wanted to welcome Councilman Paul López to the table, who is equally unforgettable. Okay, go ahead and continue.
What ifs?
And a drainage guy also.
And a drainage guy.
I am a
Okay,
drainage guy.
great. Go ahead.
Pass me the napkins.
All right. We have a very substantive discussion. Let's continue.
So the city is going to pursue a major drainage project. We're going to talk to you about that. That's going to be included in the IGA. And CDOT is pursuing this major transportation project that the city is working on as well, and we're going to talk about that also. Next slide. Thank you, Gretchen. You're not a next slide person, but I appreciate you. I appreciate that. Denver is making contributions to CDOT's transportation project in order to better the project, in order to provide enhancements for the neighborhood. We are doing so in two ways. The first way is in kind, not exactly money, but in-kind benefits that we'll provide to the project. The other way is actual money. The total city contribution, if you add both in-kind and dollars, is around $83 million. Let's start with the in-kind because it's probably just as important as the dollars. We are going to give permit fee relief to CDOT in the amount of $15 million, which means that while CDOT does have to apply for permits, follow the same rules that everybody else does, and abide by the terms of the permits, they do not have to pay the fee for those permits. The dollar value of that to them is approximately $15 million, and it's extremely important to their project. CDOT's going to be digging a very big hole, and so they're going to have a lot of dirt, and the city has agreed to take the clean dirt that they produce and use it in projects that are going to be underway nearby. This saves CDOT hauling charges, which can be very large.
Oh, Councilwoman Montero?
Thank you. I don't, I think it's, I don't want to disrupt your presentation, but I think it's very, very important if you guys could just preface it by saying how part of this goes into the whole other drainage issues that we've had in Global area Swansea, so that it's not kind of looked at as something as apart from that. Do you want to just take a couple of minutes and talk about that before we go forward?
Talk about the reasons for the drainage project?
Well,
Sure.
our drainage master plan and how that is
Absolutely, we
a part
can
of
start
it.
there.
Just a few seconds, so that, yeah.
Absolutely,
It's really
we can start
important
there,
for the
Councilwoman,
neighborhood.
no problem at all.
Okay.
Leslie?
Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Diane.
we have a picture we can share with you, just to remind you.
That would be great, yeah.
And
okay.
as you
Water.
all know, we've experienced a lot of rain in May, and this area of town, our Montclair and Park Hill basins, are about 10 square miles that drain into this area of interest where the partially covered lower will be, where Fast Tracks has a couple lines, and where National Western Center is planned, as well as the neighborhoods of Cole and Swansea and Elyria. So we've had about 3.75 inches of rain in May over 27 days. And we're still recovering. But what we're designing for here is about 2.6 inches of rain in 1 hour. And that's what the 100-year storm is, that we want to provide the protection to the community and all of the infrastructure that we're planning and are planning to build with this drainage project that we're proposing to you today.
Okay. Continue with the drainage part of this and then come back to the transportation? That's fine.
I just wanted to make sure that you prefaced it, because if we didn't have that conversation or just a brief conversation about it, it would look like it was being done in isolation, and it isn't. It's being done as part of the overall issues that we have.
I think that's just fine.
Thank you.
Let's go right directly to the rest of the drainage piece, which starts on your page 5, and talk about the drainage part of this project and the drainage part of the IGA, and then we'll come back to the transportation piece.
Thank you, Diane.
Leslie?
Gretchen, could you show the colorful map, please? Some of you have seen this, and this is a piece right out of our 2014 Stormwater Master Plan, and Mike Anderson is the author of said plan, is here with us. So if you have any particular questions, we can call him up. He also has a lot of pictures and some videos if you would like to see that, if it's helpful to you as you talk about this further. But we have a history of flooding in this area that we've identified in our plan, you all have experienced, and that we want to address. So what this plan means is, as you see the blue up there, that is water that's a foot or less deep, and that fits within our storm drain criteria. So we're not so worried about that, although it is impactful to moving around. The areas that are not blue, that are yellow and trend to red, are over a foot deep and approach 6 to 8 in places. So what we deal with in this basin is it's a very large basin. It's about 10 square miles. So a drop of water that falls on the Fairmont Cemetery gets down to this area that's by Purina, where the red area is. And it's the worst of all shapes. It's sort of a sweet potato shaped basin, so it's skinny on both ends. So all the water that collects starts at the top, but it all has to get through a narrow space at the bottom. And that's where our city is really developing, and we've got some great neighborhoods, and that we really want to work together to get a higher level of protection. So our storm drain master plan plans for a 5-year storm, and with the plan that we're bringing to you, we would like to improve that with our partnership with CDOT and urban drainage to 100-year protection. So what that looks like is, if what we will be planning to do is this is very complicated map up here on the screen, but what you see is what we've learned from our friends at Urban Drainage, and what we learned in the September 2013 flood when Aurora got hit with a lot of water. They have 2 reservoirs, and that was able to collect and meter the water through the city. So what we're proposing here, you can see the blue areas on the map. What we're proposing to do is work within our city to provide that sort of detention pond and water quality features, so that we can collect the water before it reaches our neighborhoods, I-70, the light rail tracks, and the stock show, and meter it and also clean it before it gets to the river. So these are very important community values that we've heard in the Globeville area Swansea neighborhood plans, and we've combined efforts with the CDOT technical staff, urban drainage technical staff, the city's technical staff, and RTDs, and come up with this plan that we're presenting to you. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilwoman Lehmann.
Very quickly, I just want to really thank you for addressing this issue, because I was very concerned initially when I saw your initial plans, and that you recognized this and did something about it. I really appreciate it.
Well,
Councilman, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to respond to Councilwoman Lehmann that this is going to be a real amenity for the area in a lot of ways. And Leslie, you might want to talk just a minute about the bike trails and that sort of thing.
Oh, thank you, Diane. I want to be sure that people are clear that what we're envisioning here is green space and open space with bike connections. If you've traveled through Lakewood Gulch on your bike, we partnered with Urban Drainage on that amenity when RTD came through with their West Corridor. We also have some detention ponds where we do like this, like Bible Park would be one, where it fills up during the rainstorm and then drains away and can be used as open space and as a community asset during the other times. Those are the kinds of things that we're envisioning, and we've worked with CPD and their neighborhood planning efforts to identify pieces that can be incorporated into this so that we can leverage as much space as we can for water and community-based activities.
Does anybody have any questions about the drainage project itself before we go on to the financing for it? Yes,
Councilman Brooks?
Yep. So let's go back one slide. No, that's pretty bad, but yeah, that one. So I think you did a good job explaining, the complications of these two basins. I guess I want to zoom out a little bit more and just ask you, how bad is this if we look citywide? How bad is this issue, number one? And then two, if we had the type of storm that we did, we experienced in Boulder Valley and things, what would happen here if we didn't do anything today?
So first off, on your question, how bad is this issue? This is one of our most challenging basins in the city. As we look at history, soils maps, and historical maps, things that engineers like to look at, we see indications that there was clearly a creek here before, and that over time, our city has just built over it. Just what happened as we developed. And it is, in addition to having development over those creek areas, this basin is fully developed. It isn't like some basins where you might go and there's a lot of open space involved and we can protect that and keep that. This is a 100% developed basin. So what that means in a big storm is that you will have a lot of debris coming off, meaning like, I don't know, garbage. It clogs things up, I guess is what I will say. And in a developed area, you find more than that than you do maybe in an undeveloped area. And as far as what we learned, and Paul could speak to this or agree or nod his head, is that in September of 2013, what Urban Drainage has told me they learned lessons up in northern Colorado is the areas where we have open areas to capture water, that it collects it, it drains out over time, and you have some cleanup to do with maybe mud and things on sidewalks and grass. If you have fully developed, you've got roads blow up, things float down, you'll be picking and putting things together again. You know, I guess I'm trying to be eloquent about this and not doing very well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened in September of 2013?
I can make a real quick statement.
There you go. We have our expert here. So.
This is Paul Hyman from Urban Drainage and Flood Control District.
Thank you. Just a very general statement. In 2013, if the rain cloud would have centered over this basin, as opposed to what it did do, which is centered over Aurora, the next basin to the east, if that rain cloud would have centered over this basin, you would have had worse damage than you saw in Boulder, and you probably would have seen damage on news clips that would have looked like Katrina, actually.
That's what I wanted to kind of get to, and my question is, now fast forward the two slides before we get to financing. From what we learned from Boulder, from what we learned from that catastrophe, I've heard that this is what we would have done. You know, we would have gone back and have done, you know, put together this system to prevent some of those issues. Was your plan based off of the system, or did you guys get a chance to collaborate with folks to say what would you have done in the past that would have maybe helped, you know, when this storm came?
Well, we've been working together for a little while on this, and in fact, Urban Drainage just started a outfall systems plan, and that's exactly what they do, is look at those lessons learned, look at how best to manage through a developed area, and understanding the gives and takes of what we have out there. It'll be a combination of all of the tools that we have in our toolbox to make this be the best that it can be.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have López and then Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask something similar, but, and perhaps, Paul, you've told us plenty of times on the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, and we've had a lot of insight on September of 2013. You highlight two cases, Boulder and Aurora, right? And the difference between Big Thompson area, all that, Boulder Creek coming through, Lions, all that stuff. Can you, just for this body, illustrate that for us and why it's important? And this is, it's super critical that we invest in this manner because of, I think, Paul, you sum it up. So I don't know if you wanted to fill us in on that.
Yeah. In 2013, the storm hit in the Denver metro area, kind of two major places. One was Boulder and one was Aurora. And Aurora actually got more water coming out of the sky than Boulder did. As Leslie mentioned, we've done a lot of projects through Boulder, through the Westerly Creek area. There's several detention basins plus channel improvements, these open channel improvements. And you saw very minimal damage in Aurora. There was some basements that were flooded, some streets, I think some asphalt was damaged. Nothing like, water flowing through homes, 5 feet deep, that kind of thing, which you saw up in Boulder. And then I'll contrast over to Boulder. In the areas that got hit in Boulder, those drainage improvements were not in. And in fact, there was right in the middle of that drainage as it went through the city of Boulder, there was a section that had been improved with cooperation between us and city of Boulder. And that area fared extremely well through the flood. The other areas that did not have these improvements did not, and that's the kind of news clips that you saw. So that's kind of the message to learn, that these, the science that we use and the lessons that we learn do pan out when the floods do come. And, our best flood is when nothing happens. We don't hear anything on the news. Just these past May rains have been a lot, and if a lot of improvements hadn't been in, I think you would have saw a lot more news coverage over the entire metro area just from these past May rains. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that was probably the most critical thing for a lot of us to hear on the board. And just to see that there's a great report that they have access to online as well too. But Madam Chair, my point being is that it may seem, I know folks who are probably watching may see the money up front and think that's a lot of money for digging ditches. That's a lot of money for channeling water. But if you think of what the contrary would be, right? And knock on wood, ni Dios lo mande, it would be a disaster if we don't put this money into the improvements, into the drainage improvements. We'd be looking at billions, in terms of loss and of property and life. And I think that's something that we really should be mindful of with projects like this, and especially when you build over a creek. So.
Okay, very sobering. I will take one more question on this issue, and then we really do need to move on.
Yeah, I know we want to get to the financing, which I think is the critical part of all of this. And I just want to know, are there properties that need to be taken as part of doing this project? And if so, can you just sort of highlight on the map where some of that might take place?
There will be property impacts, and we don't have exactly where they are. You can see generally that we're looking at capturing the water around the 39th area between York and about 40th. So between 40th and 38th-ish along there, which are the areas that we also have pictures of pretty significant flooding, will be, with your approval of this strategy, we'll begin putting together the plans and then working through that.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on, Dan.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Gretchen to go over slide number 9, which has the financial details on it. Just to say that that we're very fortunate that CDOT's needs are for 100-year storm protection. We are able to work with them in partnership to so that both of us can afford this transaction.
Thank you. And I'm also thankful for the comments leading up to this, because it's hard to have the dollars in front of you without understanding what it buys. So I'm appreciative of that. Essentially, this slide shows the project split up into 2 phases, and it also shows CDOT's participation, which adds to the city's participation. So in sum, CDOT, in the portion of the project that is eligible for wastewater ratepayers to pay for. So it is directly the pieces of the project that directly relate to stormwater conveyance and water quality. That's the $134 million you see, that cost at the top of your page. Of that portion of the project, the city will be paying approximately $80 million, and that is roughly 60% of the project. CDOT will be contributing approximately $53 million. That's about 40% of the project. I have to say at this point, and where we are at in design of the project with Public Works, we will continue to see some fluctuation in these numbers. These are still order of magnitude, but we do have the commitment from CDOT that when we have our actual costs, that we will see a 60-40 split on the share, which really does reflect the benefit of this project to both parties and the 100-year protection for the neighborhoods. So in the first piece, that wastewater portion, there's an early action portion, and you'll see TBDP. That's what we are calling 2 basin drainage project. That's Montclair and Park Hill. The early action portion of this is $69 million. That goes roughly from the river to 40 and 40th. And that's where CDOT will contribute $42.2 million upfront, and that is very helpful to the city. We currently have $26.8 million appropriated already in the Wastewater Fund. That is reflective of the project Denver and Public Works had anticipated doing that would have provided the 5-year protection. So we are able to act and, with partnership with CDOT, get the project started, and the timing of the project is very important. We are looking for, and Leslie, correct me, we are looking for a start to this project early in 2016, almost immediately following the conclusion of the 2016 stock show in January, so that we can be as least disruptive to those events as possible. So that early action portion is really critical to get out the door and have those funds in place. In addition, the remaining portion of the TBDP 2 basin drainage project, we will receive an additional approximately $11.4 million from CDOT. That gets them to their full 40% share. And then the city will need to provide an additional $53.6 million from the wastewater funds. And when you've seen this type of project in the past, it's on order of magnitude of a large wastewater project. We have a couple of options on how to get this done. We can do cash funding based on the phases of the project. I think in this instance we'll need to finance this project, and wastewater has a history of issuing revenue bonds supported by the revenue from the Wastewater Fund. And I've got a slide. I'm going to finish this slide, but my next slide talks a little bit more about the state of the Wastewater Fund in whole. So that obligation would be out there for the fund. In addition, the city would also pay another 39 million approximately for some of the non-wastewater elements of the project. So to get the type of project that Leslie had described, which in addition to providing the water conveyance and water quality, acts as a park-like feature for the communities that it passes through. And you see things like trees and benches and walkways, and you have the connectivity, the pedestrian and bike connectivity going through this area. Those portions of the project cannot be paid for through wastewater funds. They are not ratepayer attributable. So that will be funded from non-wastewater funds. The city has a few options that we need to explore on how to do that. I know all of you are very familiar with the size of our citywide CIP, which could not accommodate this. We have a couple of options. One is to include it and ask our friends at CDOT if we wanted to include it as part of their financing and have that conversation. And we're going to talk more about that when we come back to the transportation elements of the project. We can also look at what Department of Finance can do on our own. We're AAA rated. We have great financing options. And I just wanted to reiterate, this won't look like a dismantling of our citywide CIP to accomplish this portion of the project. So the total funding.
Okay, wait a moment. I have a couple of questions. Councilwoman Robb and then Montero.
So when we say park-like features, are these going to be, they'll have to be maintained at some point. Are they going to be park or park-like? Are they going to come under the Department of Parks?
Is Parks here? It'll be Parks. No. No, this will look similar in some ways. We've prototyped this already with the development at Stapleton, where you have areas adjacent to where water flows, where we have, in some cases, active park areas, mainly passive park areas, and it really emphasizes the bike and pedestrian connectivity, and it looks like a trail.
District for maintenance.
Yes.
We're talking about a somewhat limited park maintenance budget already, so I think when we create either park or park-like features, we need to be cognizant.
Correct. And these types of amenities are becoming more familiar and more best practice in what our departments are doing.
I think they're great practices.
It's not just to blow it up further. It's not just this project even. This is a discussion that the city needs to have as part of the 2016 budget and forward about how we take care of our increasing number of pedestrian bridges, of our blended stormwater infrastructure. But it's a very important part of the additional cost for operations and maintenance, and we'll have more information on that as the project moves through design into construction.
And then my other question, when you say we're AAA rated, so we have some options for funding this, does that AAA rated implies to me bonding? And that implies to me a bond issue down the way, and just a huge balance with new council leadership coming in of how funds are allocated bond-wise across the city. And as I understood, we don't have much more bonding capacity under our current capacity until, well, it's getting closer all the time, 2017, 2019.
True, and that is part of my next slide, so I
Oh,
can
okay.
move on to
Sorry.
that. I just wanted to.
So I have 3 more questions here, and then we need to talk about the transportation piece of this too. So let's make these quick. Montero.
I don't know how quick you want me to be. This is kind of important.
Okay.
So, do you want me to?
Well, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, a couple of questions before we go forward. I'm not trying to stall anything, but I think that it's very, very important for the neighborhood to understand what direction we're going and what it could potentially mean for them should this IGA get out of committee. Because, as you know, many of us, including the city, made comments to Colorado Department of Transportation going through the draft environmental impact statement. So is this in response to city comments as well as neighborhood regarding what we would do with drainage as it related to I-70 and the potential cap and cover?
Yes, these are conversations that relate directly to comments that we've made in the SDEIS. And as you all know, there was a very extensive comment process that council participated in, as well as all departments of the city. So this and some of the transportation pieces that you'll hear about soon are in direct relation to some of the comments that have been made. They are, I do want to clarify for this committee, that they are directed towards things that can happen in the construction part of this project. There are many other aspects to this project that Tony and Rebecca can chime in on if time allows and if the committee desires. But what we really, as Diane mentioned in the beginning, are focusing on things that will need to be addressed and that we desire to address in a partnership with the P3 contractor and then with the city's construction project.
Thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Kniech and then Ortega.
Thanks. Two questions. One, it's my understanding that for these types of projects, our partners at Urban Drainage and Flood Control often pay for a portion of the project. I didn't see that in the stack here. Why is that?
Oh, that is considered as part of Denver's existing appropriation, and we can get you the breakdown of funds if you'd like.
I don't know what that means. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So I thought Urban Drainage and Flood Control pays for half of the cost of a project that's for flood control.
They will pay for up to half. However, I don't think they have $134 million. But out of our 26.8 that you've seen here, half of that is their money.
So, okay, that's important, I think, to call out specifically. So when you say currently available wastewater funds, you're talking half our fund, half from them?
Yeah, and the reason I am listing it as wastewater funds, based on the project, the city and UDFCD, Urban Drainage, have a pretty fluid relationship between who manages the contract. So we receive funds into an account from Urban Drainage, and then they're a part of our wastewater fund now.
And they are managing the design of this project.
All right, and so is that half of 26.8 and half of 53.6?
No. 53.6 is the additional contribution that would come from the wastewater fund.
So their total contribution, so it's a $134 million project that's eligible, but their portion is only 13? That doesn't sound like enough to
Well,
me.
when we work with Urban Drainage, there is this only, and Paul and you all can help me with this, there's about $4 to $5 million total for the city that Urban Drainage funds on an annual basis. So I believe the policy of the board, and y'all can correct me, here's Paul. The policy of the Urban Drainage Board is that they will match up to 50-50. And so, Paul, we're talking about your money.
Sure. My question was, out of a $134 million project, I'm concerned that Urban Drainage is only paying $13 million. It does not seem like a very appropriate, it does not seem like a commensurate amount. This is a flood control project. It's squarely within your authority, and so it seems like your contribution should be larger.
Yep. Obviously, like every organization, we have limited funding, and we have to stretch it over the entire district. And what we do is we get requests from the local governments each year on where to spend our money. In other words, we don't really select where to put that money. We get that request from the city and county of Denver. So in this specific project, that's just the, like Leslie said, we can fund up to, our board policy, up to 50%. But I got to tell you that in today's world, we typically do not get to that level because there's so many people that have flood control requests.
Okay.
So we match as much as we can, and it's just a collaborative method on getting there.
Thank you for explaining that. My other question is in follow-up to Councilwoman Montero. So you mentioned that this is about the construction period of the project, but I guess the more specific question that I think our constituents are wondering is, in the lowered option, it's all of our understanding that the lowered option goes through a floodplain. There's been significant concern about the pumping of water to keep both the freeway from flooding as well as where the water will go that is being pumped to keep the freeway from flooding. And so I guess I'm trying to put a finer point on what I think you were asking, which is, does this project directly solve that question and concern related to the freeway post-construction?
Right. Do you want me to flip back to the map of
Yeah, you can flip back to the map, and Tony, you might want to jump in here and help me.
The hot seat.
Again, this is Tony DeVito, who's the project manager for our I-70 project for CDOT.
There are two main elements to this drainage project. One is the part of the city that drains into the highway. That's the two-basin drainage project that we've been discussing. And then there is a drainage need that the highway project will take care of, that is the water that falls onto the highway inside the walls and then is moved from there. So Tony, I'll let you talk about that.
You bet. So, good morning, everybody. So, I want to compliment first and foremost that we could have approached this drainage issue very prescriptive and said, we're going to come in here, we're going to build our 100-year flood program. You guys do whatever you want to do. We'll take care of our drainage system. By working cooperatively, we are consolidating the amount of points of drainage that are going to be hitting the river, the Platte. And it gives a redundancy. And when you do have debris in a flood storm situation, redundancy is a wonderful thing for engineers. So I want to compliment that we're at this table here and we are talking about this two-basin drainage system. We will still work cooperatively on the historic flow that comes across this area in a flood state and intercept that before it gets to the lowered section. The drainage that's collected in the lower section will be also part of CDOT's responsibility then to drain to the north and then have that enter into the historic paths. So to answer the question, there are two different systems, but we both parties recognize that there are benefits to both agencies by cooperating on the sheet flow that's coming across on the south side of the structure.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortega.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions, and the first is, are we, Denver and CDOT, expecting to have a separate IGA on all the other issues related to mitigation and the things that are being negotiated back and forth between Denver and CDOT?
Okay. A lot of the mitigation will be solidified into the record of decision. If it's truly a mitigation that was identified through the NEPA process, the contract language, the thing that really binds in the NEPA process is the record of decision. And as we go through and finalize the record of decision, that is your legal contract with not only CDOT but FHWA.
Yeah, I know. And Tony, we talked yesterday to walk through what some of those items are. And, until we see the EIS, the final EIS, we're not clear on what all those issues are going to be.
Agreed.
So I was just trying to figure out if we're only doing one IGA or if we're looking at doing just this one. To deal with some of those other things that we've been working on.
We have not seen the final EIS, and Tony, it might be helpful if you talk about real quickly the timing of the FEIS that we can see, comments, and then how that gets to the record of decision, the ROD, and then how we will, as that process goes along, determine if there are needs for additional agreements between city and CDOT, or if the record of decision will hold.
Okay. So we did release the supplemental draft in August of last year. We've been working through the comments. That's a big part of what the team does, is all the comments received need to be responded to. We are looking at releasing the final EIS late this year, early 2016. Depending on how NEPA schedules go and review schedules with all the cooperating agencies, and then a record of decision later in fall of 2016. Usually the record of decision follows a 6-month time period from when the final EIS is released. So continue with the public meetings and the comments and the talking that we've been doing as we've been solidifying all those in the final EIS and getting those out for final review. Does that help on the timeline?
Yeah, it does. I have a couple other questions, and I don't want to dominate this, and I will absolutely submit them in writing as well, but I think there are some critical issues that we need to talk about. For example, we're discussing the fact that in the IGA, the $83 million, that we're discussing a pro rata agreement. I think there needs to be a cap because we don't know what the real numbers are at this point. And in terms of what Denver's obligation is at this point, these are our best guessed estimates, right? So I think, if that number keeps changing and going up more, we should have a cap on that in terms of what Denver's expected to provide as the pro rata, the match of that pro rata agreement.
Really good question, Councilwoman, and we are, because we sort of are going back and forth between drainage and mitigation items on the transportation side at this point, I don't want us to get confused. The 60-40 pro rata split is with respect to the drainage project. And that is those numbers are estimates and they are likely to change, but they will remain at the 60-40 level. The $37 million is likely to be a fixed amount at the end of this negotiation, and it's looking more and more like that. So we'll talk about that separately.
Yeah, and I just think the actual amount that Denver's obligated to pay should be definitive and not be flexible to the point where those numbers can continue to grow. Because I've seen this drainage project go from what was originally $40 million that was earmarked for I-70 to now, $83 million. And that doesn't include all of the costs, the $39 million, that's for the park-like improvements. And so, all of this is related to an expectation that there's going to be a rate increase to the ratepayers of wastewater. And so, we don't have time in an hour and a half to get through all of these different issues, but I think, making sure that council has a clear understanding. And we've got a term sheet, we still don't have an agreement yet that really spells out, and you all know the devil is always in the details, and the financing and the expectations of what Denver taxpayers are going to be expected to pay should be an important upfront part of what we're communicating to everybody. And at this point, I have no idea what a rate increase might look like for folks to offset the cost of $80 million.
If I could jump in on the financials, just to clarify, because we do have very distinct funds between the transportation side and the drainage side. So just to recap and finish out the drainage piece, the drainage costs, I think, are confusing, and I agree, because there's a piece of it that's drainage and there's a piece of it that's non-drainage. Of the drainage piece, just to recap, there's an additional $53 million that the city needs to find in its wastewater fund. And on slide 10, I do need to be very clear with council, and we will need to have this discussion with the next council when they are seated, that Budget and Management Office in the Department of Finance has been working on a rate study and a look at both the operational side of the wastewater team and the capital program side of what they are able to construct. We have done this in partnership with Public Works, I think now 3 times in my tenure at the city. And we come back to council after each of these studies and we look at what are our projections going forward and how do we maintain financial sustainability in the fund. There are a number of cost pressures that come onto the fund and continue to grow. Cost pass on from our partners, the increasing cost of construction. We did in our last rate increase build in a small increase for CPI, for inflation, but it hasn't been enough to cover what the demands on the fund are. So I do need to say that BMO will be finishing this study by July of 2015. Their timing had been before this project and this coordination with CDOT to come to City Council in advance of the 2016 budget and be able to have that discussion at the same time.
So what are the implications to this project if the future council doesn't support a rate increase?
So what this project can do, a rate increase, regardless of this project, a rate increase is needed. The rate increase does 2 things. It enhances the citywide capability of the fund to be able to construct, and it builds a robust, for the first time, a truly robust water quality program, which we really need to meet some of our state requirements. So those are the 2 demands that were already on the fund. What this project represents is one great big water quality project coming out as our first project in coordination with CDOT. So this project goes a long way towards our discussions with the state on how we're doing with our MS4, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit Requirements. But it is a challenge for the city. We need to tackle this, and that is what our finance team will be bringing forward. And I regret that the timing is out of sync, and to be upfront about that. What would be preferred is to have to you what the rate increase is, and then to show this project as a piece of that. What I will tell you is that this project does not drive the rate increase. The rate increase was there already, and this project will be a part of it.
And I also want to take this opportunity to apologize for confusing the transportation side of this IGA with the drainage side. When Councilwoman Ortega is speaking about $80 million, I think she is looking at the transportation side, which I haven't had a chance to visit with you about yet. And I'd like to try to be sure that everybody keeps the two things very separate in your minds. It's hard to do because we talk about them together and they are working together in this particular IGA.
Well, in my mind, I'm looking at the total amount of wastewater expectations that are contributing towards both the transportation and the wastewater piece. So that's the $80 million figure.
119. We just have to look at the same numbers, or I think we're all going to be confused. The total for the wastewater is 119. It's way more than 80.
I'm looking at the contributions from the wastewater fund.
The 119 is the sum of all of the Denver portions on this page. And I tried to break it down in a number of ways because it is pretty complex. So that's the existing available wastewater funds, the $53.6 million that's needed in new wastewater funds, and the $39 million that's needed in non-wastewater funds. So what I wanted to show is the order of magnitude of what Denver contributes to this on both sides of that ledger.
So can you just speak about what the $10 million risk reduction line item entails?
Are we going back to transportation?
So I think this would be a good time. We could move to the transportation funding side and clarify some of the numbers that have been, the numbers we've talked about right now that are on page 9, I think we're fairly clear on, and we can move to the transportation side.
So we'll go back to slide number 2. And again, we'll remind you that there are two kinds of contributions that the city is proposing to make to the CDOT project, the transportation project. The first I was describing as the permit fee relief, not an unusual thing. We do that on major projects quite often. And I had gotten as far as the, we're going to take the dirt and move it a much shorter distance and make that a lot less expensive for CDOT, so we get credit for that in-kind contribution of $3 million. You're asking, Councilwoman, about a $10 million allocation as risk reduction. In a P3 procurement, the bidders are worried about several things, but one of the major things they have to worry about coming in from the outside is the relationship between the transportation agency, CDOT in this case, and their local municipalities that they need to deal with. The fact of the city creating this partnership and entering into this intergovernmental agreement in order to move forward with the project and know that there's collaboration is worth an enormous amount of money to the bidders. And so it is assumed in this allocation of $10 million of risk reduction that the ability of CDOT and the city to cooperate to the extent that CDOT will know that they will not be held up in terms of permitting and inspections that will be critical in this process, to know that the city is going to embed staff with CDOT through the construction portion of this project, as we often do with partners in big projects, to know that the city is going to be able to use its relationships with Excel and other providers of utilities. These sorts of things are invaluable when it comes to the P3 procurement, and CDOT is assuming that it will, in fact, be of $10 million worth of benefit to them to have these agreements in place. the devolution of Brighton Boulevard. Brighton Boulevard is a state road, but we have much responsibility for how that road is treated, and we have agreed through the permission of Jose Cornejo of Public Works and others that we will take over the operation of that piece of Brighton Boulevard, which we were already doing anyway, pretty much.
That didn't really tell me exactly how the 10 million will be utilized. I mean, I heard very clearly what you stated, and that we've already sort of given that we're going to provide $15 million worth of relief, if you will, or get credits for the permits and that part of the process. But I'm not clear how $10 million will be utilized.
Tony, would you mind helping them?
So part of the thing when we go into these P3 developments is the contractor sitting on the other side has to kind of ascertain risk. And if one of the biggest things that in their question would be, how are we going to get finger pointing among a city and a state agency? How long are unknowns on review times from the city on plans that need to be approved? And so all that, if there's a lot of uncertainty, and given some of the other projects that they've dealt with where there's lack of partnership between the agencies, that drives up the cost because it adds to risk of delivering and cost and delays. So by us demonstrating in our contract that we have IJ'd, we've given commitments of 2-week turnaround for plan reviews. We have staff embedded. Those kind of things will evaluate to less risk being bid. And we're basically saying in this IGA that we're crediting $10 million worth of that, what we say, risk reduction to this IGA. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, it adds more clarity.
Thank you, Tony.
So I will submit my questions because I've got others, and I know everybody else has. You want to finish your presentation, everybody else has questions, and I got to leave to go take my grandkids to lunch.
Have a nice lunch.
Please continue. Thank you.
The final item on the in-kind side of the ledger here is $13 million in credit for the city's right-of-way. The city is agreeing, the city and CDOT have agreed, our real estate departments have agreed, that the total value of the rights-of-way that they will be acquiring from us is about $25.7 million. CDOT is able to pay $12.7 million for that, and they are giving us $13 million of credit, the delta crediting us on the in-kind side because we will be selling that right-of-way at less than its value to the project. The other side of the ledger is what the city is actually going to agree to pay for. The city has been working with CDOT, as all of us know, and Councilwoman Montero, Councilwoman Ortega, many other people have worked hard on looking at how to make the cover, particularly of the partial covered lowered alternative, work better and be more amenable to the neighborhoods. And in doing that, some of the most important things that we are asking them to do over and above what they would be ordinarily doing are the bookends. And I'm going to let Leslie explain what those are. The slip ramps and some widening of bridges. And if Leslie will take that, I would appreciate it.
I'll do that, and Tony, jump in when you want to clarify. So on the graphic that you see in front of you here, the cover is the green area sort of to the left. So the centerpiece between the two brown lines that go through that, those lines are Clayton and Columbine Streets. The area between Clayton and Columbine was in CDOT's original plan as the cover to make the connection to the community. We've worked with planning, and our planning director, Brad Buchanan, has pointed out to us, after study of several other covers in the country, namely in Dallas, that the cover can be more fully utilized if we can put some space on the outside of those roads. So that's the bookends is what they were termed, and those are the two sort of green stripes on the east and west side of Clayton and Columbine.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
How big are they? They're, right now, the biggest that whole cover can be is 999 feet. And that has to do with all the work CDOT has done to study the air quality in the area. And so the total is 999 feet, which I believe leaves the opportunity for about 60 feet of bookends on either side. We have been working with CDOT and DPS and others in the neighborhood, in the community, to figure out just what that should look like. So those will be sized to cover what folks think is the right thing to do out there. But just didn't want to have that drop off on the edge of those roadways so we can fully utilize that investment.
Okay.
So those are the bookends. The slip ramps are a little more difficult to describe, but what they are is additional space inside the highway so that folks who want to, yes?
Can you move the mouse on the, there you go.
Oh, there
Yep.
we go.
Can you-
Thank you. So they happen between Steele Vasquez, if you can show where that is, Gretchen, right there is Steele, and Colorado Boulevard. The intersection that's one more over is Colorado Boulevard. The intersections of Colorado Boulevard and Steele Vasquez work together in what's called a split diamond arrangement. So you would get on and off at Colorado Boulevard to get to Steele Vasquez and vice versa. One of the challenges with that is that the space between Colorado Boulevard and Steele Vasquez, the frontage roads in those areas act like interstate highway ramps. So what we've agreed to do to mitigate traffic in the neighborhood, out of direction travel, those types of things, operations of the city network, is to put additional ramp space down in the highway area around between Steele and Vasquez. And that would look like, the easiest way to describe it is on I-25, when you get off way ahead to get onto Broadway and Lincoln, and there's a really long ramp that goes underneath Logan, and then you end up at Broadway and Lincoln. And then there's another one at Colorado Boulevard and Evans that behaves the same way. Imagine how much traffic there would be on Bucktail Boulevard if you didn't have those slip ramps. So that's what we're talking about here. And it does go directly to Councilwoman Montero's comments about how does this tie to the comments we made on the SDIS, and this ties directly to comments that we made about concerns about traffic cutting through the neighborhood, and this will facilitate cars and trucks moving to the highway in the way we desire them to go, as opposed to going through the neighborhoods. And we can provide you much more detailed engineering drawings upon your request.
The bridges up too.
Oh, and the bridges. So there are two main bridges that we did also request CDOT help us with, and they've included it in their drawings, and we're including it here. But at Quebec and Peoria, we want to be sure that there's room for an improved Quebec and an improved Peoria when this project is done. So as the mainline highway is reconfigured with the I-70 project, those bridges will be made big enough so when we get the money to widen Quebec underneath the highway and widen Peoria for additional lanes and sidewalks and such, the highway will be set up so the space is there for that.
Okay, so the transportation portion of this IGA.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt for a second? Did you mention the 10 million in cover amenities?
I was just going to get back to that.
Okay,
which is the last of the actual dollar contributions that we're talking about, is cover amenities. The CDOT folks are paying for the cover and the amenities that they believe are attributable to the cover itself. And the agreement is that the city will pay for amenities above and beyond what CDOT analysis shows to be the required pieces of that. That's a kind of an awkward way of describing that because we're still in the stage of, let's not say arguing, let's say discussing what those are. We believe deliberating. I like that, Tony. That sounds better. But that $10 million, I believe, is a fair evaluation of the sort of pro rata piece that we believe the city things that the city's asking for that would not normally be provided by the Transportation Department. If you'll note then that there is considered to be a grand total of transportation contribution from Denver to be $83 million, but 46 of that is in-kind contributions, and we are pleased to be able to do that because we believe it will be that it will all add up to savings for CDOT on the entire transportation project that we can all take advantage of. There are two more pieces to the negotiation that we've gone through that I do want you to know about and tell you about quickly. And then I will tell you that the papering of this, the document itself, the IGA, is in a final draft stage as of probably tomorrow. We'll be distributing it to each of you and your colleagues, the remainder of your colleagues on council. And we'll hope that we will be able to talk to you individually about questions you may have, explain things if they're the fact that both the city attorney's office, we love the city attorneys, and the attorney general's office are having to agree on the way much of the boilerplate looks in this document. Does make it take a little longer, but they are doing well together as I understand it. The other piece that I want to tell you about real quickly is a final request from CDOT that we give an assist to them in 2018. There will be another round of the TIP process in Dr. Cog. And we were asked by CDOT to agree to make their project, their I-25 project, Alameda to Cedar, our top priority. We did consult with the folks in Public Works extensively, Janice Finch and Chrissy and Leslie and George and Jose, and they all ultimately agreed that it is appropriate for us to do that. So we will be asking Dr. Cog for the usual series of projects to be funded, but our top priority will be that I-25 project. And we also agreed that we would pay 50% of the local match on that if we are granted that money, which CDOT believes will be, the total will be about $6 million, and we would agree that we would pay 3 of that. So that was a kind of a last-minute ask, but in contemplating that, Public Works believes that that is an appropriate thing for the city to do. And I know that we've taken much more than our allotted time, and Councilwoman, I apologize for that, but it's a big project and an important project, and I need to ask each of you voting members to please pass this IGA along to your council colleagues for hearing on the 22nd of June.
Okay. I know I have a question from Councilwoman Kniech.
Yeah, I have a couple. Thank you, Madam Chair. First question is, I get the urgency of starting the drainage project, but I'm curious if you were to say, you know, if my constituents ask me, why are we pinning down a number for the ramp amenities before design is done? Why are we doing an agreement on these pieces while they're still being negotiated? What's the answer to that?
Well, I would point to the schedule, and I'd ask for Tony's discussion on this, because CDOT has already released their RFQ, and we are trying to keep pace with their project to combine these portions of both projects together. I also just wanted to point out, one, I can't leave the table as the finance person without pointing out that the portions that we are looking at for the estimated availability payment, that estimated $37 million, as the design continues, which will be over many, many months, and CDOT finalizes its financing for the P3, they estimate that their first payments will be due in 2022, which would also be the city's share of the payment as well. So this is just a very long timeline, and to keep pace with their RFQ, RFP process so that the concessionaires, or as you call them developers, understand what the relationship between the city and CDOT is on this piece, so that we can capture the in-kind contribution of the $10 million is another piece of why all of this moves together at the same time. They get confidence, and CDOT realizes savings to its project because these agreements are in place early.
I think that's a great way to explain it, and I would add one more thing that I think is important here, and that is that CDOT, actually long ago, agreed that the city will be part of the development of the RFP, both parts, and the selection committee for the concessionaire. That will be done in two parts. There'll be a financial side and a technical side. Leslie Thomas, the city engineer, will sit on the panel on the technical side, and I will sit on the panel on the financial side. And Tony DeVito will sit on our panel, selection panel, and RFP process for the drainage project. So we are combining our forces there so that we will keep constantly in tune with one another.
On the wastewater side, CDOT, what's the source of the funds, and you're confident of your ability to get that appropriated and through the legislature?
Okay, so the source of the funding for the project really boils down to what we call Faster Bridge allocation that identifies pretty much everything within the template of replacing the bridge that's needed. So that attributes to the right-of-way, utility relocates, we're working with the railroad and with the drainage. So of the budget, we're capitalizing and leveraging our bridge enterprise to the tune of $850 million. Then we have the $50 million from DRCOG, and then the remainder of that is the first 2-year allocations of Senate Bill 228, which we continue to look for how those forecasts project. That still leaves us with a $90 million funding gap that we've been talking about. That's why this IGA, this partnership that has attributed some of this funding, does allow us then to keep moving along the procurement path of showing how we're closing that gap, working with our partner, City of Denver.
And Madam Chair, thank you for your forbearance. This is my last question, and actually that was exactly what it is, which is, does this agreement help to close the gap? And then secondly, because, I want to just ask it in two ways. Does this mean you will not then be asking Denver for any more cash to fill that gap? And two, nor will you be asking DRCOG for additional dollars on the top of the already 50 committed to fill the gap? Because when you do that, it impacts the pool of funds for our other remaining projects. And I certainly, just to let the committee members know, as one of the DRCOG reps, I'm not totally comfortable with the agreement we've made on the DRCOG piece, but I need to understand it better. So I will follow up with that offline, because there is another department I didn't hear listed, which is CPD, that is very involved in making our DRCOG priorities, and I don't hear that they were included in, and so anyway.
They were, Councilwoman, just to let you know.
Okay, they weren't in that list of names. So anyway, so I want to understand that better offline, but are we done? With this agreement, are you done asking Denver or other non-state parties for funds for this project?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. As we continue to formalize this agreement and the importance of this project, not only for this area but for the state, we are going to have to finalize a lot of those issues. This does help, obviously, as you are a board for the city. There's a board for the state, as in the Transportation Commission. This does help among that commission group to understand the partnership that has come forth in this. That does help us move forward in getting resolution through our boards. I know I can't definitively give you that answer today.
Just one quick comment. I don't get to vote on the committee. I'm just visiting today. But, on the floor, I think that it's a really great agreement, and there are a lot of win-wins here, and I think it is important to show that cooperation, because everything you've learned about each other in this process will help us as we manage the project. I am concerned it's too early. I'm concerned that it's too early, that there's going to be a later ask, and we're going to be negotiating piecemeal side agreements. That's my concern. So it doesn't mean that I can't support this, but it just means that if there are potential later asks that are not included in this, then it's very awkward. It's much better, in my opinion, to have everything on the table and all the asks sorted out at the same time, because it's really hard let's say you make an ask to us later, and for us to say, but we gave you consideration in that last contract. And that should count towards that. It's very hard to do that. And so I worry that it's a little soon without a record of decision, without these other things being finalized on the design of the cover. But I, in no way am encouraging my colleagues to hold it up. I think that I hope I will be proven wrong, and that there won't be later asks that are awkward to negotiate because we've pre-negotiated half, 2/3, 3/4. This is not ideal, in my opinion. But I understand that it's a really enormous project, and I do want us to start the drainage work, and so, anyway.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Duly noted everything. By the time we meet again before formal voting, I will try to get an answer to your specific question.
Okay, Councilwoman Robb and then Councilwoman Lehmann.
My question goes so far back to the Stormwater Finance Department study that I'll ask it offline.
Okay, I'm sorry. I skipped Councilman López. I didn't realize he had a question.
I just had a comment moving forward, but I didn't know what Councilman Lehmann.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Certainty is something I think we all want, and we would love to have it. If we don't start this now, then we'll just be the same place 5 years from now or 2 years from now or something. At some point, you've got to say, okay, yeah, we're working on this. It's not done. It's not guaranteed. And it's so far out. Besides which, if you look at the economy that goes like this, I mean, certainty is not there. I think that this is good enough to start with. I think we all need to recognize it isn't solid because it can't be solid. And so I think I think it's good enough to go with, and I think we should go with it.
Councilman López.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do appreciate a lot of the digging and making sure that the funds are secured. They're coming rightfully from, and proportionally from the different players who are on the table. And I think back, and I don't see our manager of public works. I think back just the simple price of concrete and how much that changes, and how much that kills a project, how much that hampers us in the future. And I think it's up for us to be able to at least know the parameters, at least from the get-go, to kind of figure out where we're at. There's a lot of unknowns, and there are a lot of uncertainties. But the one thing that we have to remember, I do appreciate the willingness to come back to the table, the willingness to be transparent and accountable. I think all of us around the table share the same constituency, whether whether we pay state, Dr. Cog, urban drainage, or even Denver City taxes. It's the same taxpayers that we're talking about with the same goals. And having been the chair for the last year and a half, Paul, for the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District, I've learned a great deal about flood control and prevention. And the fact of the matter is this: the best time to plan for a flood was 20 years ago. And we need to make sure that we are moving forward with this, that is the forefront, because I guarantee you, and knock on wood, we've seen a crazy May weather, and I'm not talking about the boxer, but the actual weather. I'm on a roll, Diane. Okay. I wouldn't discount, I know it's the coffee, I would not discount another event that we had in Colorado, and it was, I feel very sorry, and it still hurts me to see those communities that have been devastated, that still haven't been able to recover fully. As a Denver legislator, councilman, it would be horrendous. And what we would have to pay to remediate, to bring it back to where the state it is in right now, I think would be in the billions. And so I think it's prudent of us to move forward with it. Yes, I-70 brings up a lot of different emotions, a lot of different controversies, some of which I find that the opposite of some of the folks at the table with. But the matter of the fact is, it's drainage, flood control prevention. That's one of the basic functions of government, and I think it's prudent us to move forward with an eagle eye on it, Councilman Kinich. So, Madam Chair, I would love to make the motion to move this out of committee into the floor.
Do you have a second? Okay, I think at least one other council member has wanted to make a comment.
So, as a current representative for Globeville, Swansea, and Elyria, all of my colleagues have been living and breathing Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea, and I hope that, I really hope that you all go away from the table understanding how much we have drilled deep and tried to do our very best to be proactive and figure out what the future will hold. I know that I've done my very, very best, and just on the neighborhood level, that's what I always really care about. During the first years that I got elected, and Leslie will remember this, we spent, was it $30 million out of wastewater to take Globeville out of the flood plain because of the issues that you've seen there, and to rechannel the river and do that. And even with that amount of money that was invested in the neighborhood, we still didn't take everyone out of the floodplain. Now, for a homeowner, for a homeowner that lives there, it's pretty basic. You know, you look at your home insurance rates, and if you're in a flood district, they're extremely higher than other parts of the city, as well as commercial businesses. So at the very, very basic level, to be able to leverage what we were going to do anyway and figure out how we partner with CDOT to be able to move forward with astounding resources that we need to direct towards this is very, very important. So I see many of the community benefits that I think that current residents in the future may realize. And then just the other thing that I want to say is that Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and I'm just focusing on that because that's what I'm supposed to do as a representative, but have been overwhelmed with environmental and justice issues that none of us ever had a part of, but that all of us today can take the responsibility of lifting that neighborhood. So I know that the motion has already been made by Councilman López and seconded, but as the representative for that area, I would really love to move forward with this and also say that I know we cut into a big part of the agenda, but this was very, this is amazing work that's before us, and I don't know how many hours all of you spent at the table. What did you call it, in deliberation? But I want to say that I really, really appreciate that because we all worked very hard to get over, we didn't do it alone, but there were over 900 comments that went into the, what is the S part? The supplemental draft environmental impact statement for I-70. And there was a lot of attention on this project, and I'm confident you're going to continue to rise to that expectation. So thank you.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Robb?
Aye.
Montero?
Aye.
Lehmann? Aye. López?
Aye.
Council Chair Shepherd?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, great. So, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
That was a marathon. Okay, so Arts and Venues is here, and I realize we're 5 minutes out. They have promised to do a 5-minute presentation and then open it up for questions. So, can folks stay? I actually have to leave, but Councilwoman Lehmann is going to take over for me in 5 minutes. So, go ahead, Kent and Ginger, go ahead and take your spots and we'll get started right away.
Hi, Kent Rice here, Executive Director, Arts and Venues. The good news is several of you have already had individual briefings on this topic. The topic is the next stage, which is the planning initiative underway for reimagining the Performing Arts Complex. It's one of 3 projects that form the mayor's new Activating Denver's Urban Core. This planning initiative has been underway since November, well, actually much longer, frankly, but in November, the mayor appointed an executive leadership team to oversee this effort, and it deals principally, we're only going to show you 2 slides here just to make sure this goes quickly.
Should be attached.
We'll show you those in a moment. But it's really about the Denver Performing Arts Complex, which we call DPAC. Some people call it DCPA, but I think you know it's the 12-acre parcel of land that is really the center of the city's performing arts and outdoor space, really. We're using Sculpture Park for a lot of events as well. It's adjacent to the Colorado Convention Center. We have a complementary planning initiative underway for the Colorado Convention Center. We'll speak very briefly about that. This plan will be completed by the end of the year. We have an outside firm doing most of the architectural deliberations with us. The executive leadership team, and Congressman Brooks is on that, meets once a month.
He's been promoted.
Congressman, wow.
It's been a long morning.
That's why he left. He had to get on a plane to Washington. Thank you for that correction, Councilman Brooks.
It happens a lot.
So he could give you more information on it as well. So we meet from between 2 and 4 hours per month. This group is a hard-working group.
The presentation isn't working, but we have hard copies.
But no sweat. You guys know what the parcel of land is. I was going to show you that. The other thing that Ginger will...
It's on the...
So we are collaborating with the resident companies, including the DCPA, of course, because we don't operate that building, but Arts and Venues is in charge of the whole parcel of land. The 32 people represent the community broadly. They're all different stakeholders. We've got $17 million in bond money to pay for whatever we do, which clearly will not be enough. So at some point there will be likely a P3, a public-private partnership, and or some other kind of funding. Actually, I think given the time, Ginger, let's go to the fork. This will show you the overview of the planning initiatives. The Convention Center master plan is being done by one firm, the Arts Complex by another firm, but they're working very well together. They used as a framework, literally a framework, something called an urban framework design that we did in cooperation with community planning and development. And Ginger can just kind of show you the fork here. The urban framework design, if anyone wants a copy of it, or soft copy or hard copy, we can provide it. It's beautiful and it's also smart. Commentary on the interaction, the intersection of the Auraria campus, the downtown environment, and then our two major assets in that area, the Convention Center and the Arts Complex.
Could you pass that?
Be happy to.
Hi, I'm Ginger White, Deputy Director for Arts and Venues. So as Kent mentioned, we are in the process of developing this master plan. We have engaged an executive leadership team that the mayor appointed, 32 people. As Kent mentioned, Councilman Brooks is the council representative on that committee. And they've been meeting since November, learning a lot about how we operate the arts complex, how the resident companies utilize the arts complex, how seat tax works, and also how trends in cultural consumption and other things that are happening that are all impacting how you should think about the future of the arts complex. Concurrently, as Kent mentioned, we have the urban design framework plan that finished up earlier this year, and now we're working with H3, which is a firm out of New York that is working with and side by side the executive leadership team to develop the master plan, which will be delivered to you all and to the mayor at the end of this year. Just a little bit about H3 and the charge of the master plan. We are really thinking about it with 4 goals in mind. Certainly, we want to make sure that we boost and enhance Denver's cultural and creative vitality. Understand and make sure that we're preserving the arts complex as a premier economic place for economic activity in downtown. This number 3 is really important to us in thinking about how do we ensure that the arts complex is relevant in future years by ensuring that we're keeping this place vibrant and at the forefront of people's thinking when they think about a place to go and enjoy arts and culture as we think about our changing and growing population here in the city. And then lastly, making sure that we're sustaining this, that this is a model that can leverage current investment in the arts complex and perhaps bring other investment to the arts complex. And really, H3, again, this firm out of New York that we're working with, have distilled that into 3 goal statements, which is to enliven the arts complex, to diversify the kinds of, not just the kinds of uses and the kinds of arts activity you'd see there, but the kind of people that come to the arts complex, and that it's a sustainable model. And so, as I've mentioned to some of you who we've met with before, we are in the midst of the public-facing stage of this process. We had a meeting last month, and we were pleased to have 120 people at that first meeting. We have another one next week, also at the Ellie Calkins Opera House in the Chambers Grant Salon downstairs. So we are actively promoting that, and I have invitations, hard copy for you all to take with you today. And then we'll probably have another meeting before the October meeting so that we can start looking at some of the ideas that are coming out of this planning effort. And of course, all of our executive leadership team meetings happen monthly, and those are open to the public. So anyone who is interested in this topic is welcome to join us, listen in on the conversation, and weigh in at those public meetings. And then we will also be working on an outreach effort that includes we have a survey that we're doing that lives online currently. We're also partnering with our friends in planning and parks for the Activate Urban Core survey that will go out to 1,200 Metro Denver residents. And so we're encouraging people to visit us online, give us their perspectives online on this 1,200-person survey. And this summer, we're going to spend a lot of time out in the community and with a sort of a roadshow version of the public meetings that we've been having at the Arts Complex. So if there are opportunities within your council districts for us to do that, we would obviously welcome that opportunity.
Two nuggets for you. One is that the firm H3 that we hired out of New York, one of their partner firms is Hardy Collaborative, and Hugh Hardy was the original architect for Betcher Concert Hall, which had nothing to do with our hiring them. It was just a happy coincidence. But he knows this place very well and knows it from its birth in the 70s. The other thing I'd say is that the connection between what we're doing and our Imagine 2020 cultural plan is very direct. I mean, we expect to be able to fulfill some of the 7 initiatives of that plan by what we will eventually develop here in the Arts Complex. So we're very happy with the progress we're making. We think the firm that's helping us is terrific, and I think the members who are involved in it, the external community members, are happy with what we're doing as well. So we'll take any questions. That was an executive summary of the executive summary, but you're all executives.
Brilliant. Okay, Councilwoman Montero and then Councilman Lehmann.
When you said that community planning and development and parks and recreation are involved, is Parks and Recreation involved because of the green space that's on Spear?
Yeah, that's part of the intersection. Also because there's 2 concurrent planning efforts that are happening with 16th Street Mall and the Downtown Parks Master Plan. We thought there could be some efficiencies gained by collaborating on some of those different research and survey efforts so that we could combine budgets and staff capacity and hopefully get some really interesting data that we could share that's relevant to both projects.
Yeah. So will that include looking at the safety issue of crossing Spear near there?
That's certainly something that we're looking at within our plan, and that's one of the things that our planners are that connection to Auraria, and how do we do it programmatically, but also through physical connections, and is there an opportunity through this planning process to try to address some of that?
And then what about the connection to the river? Is that going to be brought into the conversation?
Those are all the parts of the Cherry Creek.
Yeah.
Isn't that a river? Oh, it's a creek.
Crick.
I just wanted to be sure we weren't in North Denver still.
We didn't know
No, we're not talking about the floodplain here. No, those are clearly on the list, Congress.
Yeah.
I started to call you Congresswoman. I got Congress on my mind. Councilwoman Montero, those are definitely the connection to the Auraria campus, and the pedestrian safety is an issue. Connectivity to the bike path and Cherry Creek are also on the list, absolutely.
Is the Coliseum on the list as well?
Not on this list. The Coliseum, and you probably know, but Arts and Venues was involved heavily in the National Western Center planning, and we still are. But this is just about the downtown performing arts complex.
And I know when you briefed me, we talked about this, but the Emily Griffith School is something that's being considered.
it's being considered as part of the convention center master
Okay.
plan, not this plan, but they're directly related. That site is. And one of the things the urban framework design did was identify areas of opportunity, both parcels of land and traffic patterns and that sort of thing. But it's definitely in the conversation. Councilwoman Robb.
Thank you. And then if I could,
Yeah.
I just have one comment. We've heard really catalytic projects, big changing projects at this committee, and we're dealing, there was a press conference on another one this morning, and I see the city's investments, as they should be, massively growing. But, you know, as a swan song, I have to say, we can't forget the investments we need in the outlying neighborhoods. No reflection on your project, but I'm afraid we are so focused on these catalytic projects that we're not going to be looking at the whole city in investment that comes up in the future. And we just really have to save a little money to go out into the communities.
The other thing that eventually we should look at this, I think, is not in Denver, but the surrounding cities and counties that are getting their own vibrant cultural. And maybe instead of competing, we need to cooperate on those.
Good point. Very good point, both of you.
Okay, anything else? No. Okay, I would like to thank you for coming. I apologize, but we had two big things. I would like to invite you back when you'd like to talk to us more and have more time. And on that note, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denver 8 on TV and online. Stay connected to your community, your city, your source.
You're watching Denver 8 TV, your city, your source.